Hey friend, Matt here. This video is an addendum to Derek's new video, and please only watch this if you're really interested in the struggles that I've had this year. They've never seemed to end for me this year, and that's what I'm going to talk about here. So please only watch this if you're really interested in knowing what I've been through this year, because I'm going to try to cover everything. So let me start off in December, or like October, November of 2024. The initial funds from my first round of fundraising in 2024 kind of dried up, and around, I want to say like the end of October 2024, and I was able to actually get back to work at that time, which was good for me, because I was on an upswing, So November comes around. In September, I started a new relationship with a nice, wonderful girl in the Philippines, and in December, the back due amount from Social Security hit my account, and I had fought really hard last year, and I wanted to do something nice for myself. So I worked through November and December, and I saved up some more money, and I was able to go to visit my new girlfriend in January to February, and so I spent the beginning of 2025 with her in the Philippines. I landed on my birthday. We celebrated together. 8 days later was her birthday. We celebrated together. I met her family, her sisters, her father, her brothers, cousins, nieces, nephews. I must have met 50 of her family members. And overall, I had a really good time. My numbers when I left, my last test from chemo in December of 2024, my CEA, which is the tumor marker and what they use to test in your blood to figure out how your cancer is doing, was really low. It was at, I want to say something like 86 or 84. And then I was in the Philippines for 35 days. I was off of chemo for just about 2 months. I got back on chemo shortly after I got home, probably about 10 days after I got home. And my numbers had gone from, like I said, 84 or 86 to like 92 or 96 or something like that. Like it had increased a very slight amount. So one of the challenges I faced was, a few days after being in the Philippines, I had brought my blender with me because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get a quality one over there that would be able to chop up lemons and the kale that I put in my green smoothies. And I thought I had a power adapter to go from their voltage to our voltage, and it turns out it was just a regular adapter for me to plug something into a different outlet. And as soon as I plugged the blender in, it blew up, and that's kind of important because it affected my health when I got home. It affected me really for months to come. So there's that. I left the Philippines on February 15th. There's a day's difference. There's 24 hours difference. So I ended up getting home on the 15th as well. And as soon as I got home, I was served with an eviction notice and given 2 months to get out. The first thing I tried to do was jumpstart my coaching practice, and I was working on that for about a week when my roommates so graciously cut me off from the Wi-Fi, because from their point of view, I'm sitting around, but in actuality, I'm working online and building, like repairing my funnel. If you don't keep up your websites for a while, they tend to fall apart and break, and so you've got to go in and repair them and fix things and make sure that every part is working again. And that's what I was doing until they cut me off from Wi-Fi. And then that also affected me in the way that I had all the files on my computer that I could use to apply for help, that I qualify for, that would help me move. And my desktop computer isn't something I can just take out to a place where there's Wi-Fi, and the kind of files weren't going to be able to be sent to my phone or any other solution that I tried to think of. So there was that. So I didn't really have too many options there. Around that same time, I had to pay $1,200 for a headlight repair to pass a vehicle inspection so I could keep driving Uber. So there was that I had to get done, and that was another bump to the wallet. So I'm sorry, this is hard. It's like reliving everything again. All right. So then I had to drive Uber for 6 weeks straight, and that was just to raise the money to be able to move. And I barely had any days off aside from chemo and recovery days. The roommates at home were increasing the drama and insanity and creating more problems for me. I tried to set boundaries with them, but they didn't respect it at all. Like, I was out working on things and trying to raise the funds to move, and they just keep texting me with stupid stuff. And as much as I would try to ignore it or not pay attention to it, it still bothered me. It still caused a lot of stress. So what happened was I ended up sleeping in my car sometimes 5 or 6 nights in a row just to avoid going home and dealing with more drama. And that was part of the reason. The other part of the reason was it was an hour and a half to drive home and an hour and a half to drive back in the morning to start work again. So I was trying to save miles on the car and save 3 hours of driving. And okay, so why was I driving 3 hours for work? Because living where I was living in Southbridge, Mass, that's like the Worcester area, the central part of the state, there's a different rate to drive Uber out there, and it equates to like $10 less an hour. And why would you take a $10 an hour pay cut purposefully? Whereas if I drove the Boston area, it's $10 more an hour. So that's why I wasn't wanting to drive home an hour and a half every day and drive an hour and a half back to the city every day. So they ended up harassing me more and more, and it was really stressing me out. And kind of the only proper rest I was getting was when I was going home around the time of my chemo treatments, and I would just kind of go home the day before, rest, and then go get chemo and then rest for a day or two before going back out to work again. And at that time I had the strength to do that. I kept struggling to find a place to live, a place that I could afford, and especially since I was still trying to raise the money. Like, people don't want to talk to you when you're still raising the money, when you don't have the money to move yet. They don't see you as like a serious candidate to invite into their space or rent a room or place to. So there was that. Part of the problem too was 2 laws passed in Massachusetts that ended up cutting my pay by 2/5 a day. Or just any time I worked, I was making 2/5 less. It doesn't matter if it was an hour, a day, or a week, I was making 2/5 less. So I make dramatically less money an hour, and it's much harder to make money when you have no choice but to take a pay cut. That were two laws in Massachusetts. One of them was the legalization of $32.50 an hour, which ended up being a pay cut because as Uber drivers, we were making $40 or $50 an hour. And so now we're legally allowed to be paid less than what we were making. And then the other thing was Massachusetts decided that all of the people in the state who were here seeking sanctuary were now eligible to get driver's licenses. And then, like, immediately overnight, Uber and Lyft were oversaturated with drivers. So the rates dropped dramatically because now the workforce is too much for the workload, meaning there were more drivers able to handle the amount of people needing rides. And so what that does is during non-busy times, there's too many drivers on the road and too few people looking for rides. So the work gets spread out and divvied up amongst more people, and you end up making less money. That obviously became a problem over the summer too, when most people left the city, but I'll get to that. But work dried up in the summer too, and that caused a big problem, which I'll get to. I'm trying to go through things in like a linear order. So then my roommate, one of them, started causing drama on Facebook and tagged me and my new girlfriend in some weird post that only my roommate, me, my girlfriend, and two of my roommate's friends could see, and like two friends that I don't even know. Why is she doing that? That didn't make any sense at all. So I go to her wall to look at it, and then I see another post on her wall where she's like vaguely accusing me of things, doing things when I'm barely even home anymore. Like, I don't have the time or the effort or even the care to cause any kind of the drama at home. I just want to get out of there. Like, that's all I keep thinking. I just keep ignoring them and just trying to work and tend to myself and just get out of there. I block her and ignore her, and she responds by winding the landlord up, who is also living there, so he's also one of the other roommates. And she keeps sending him to harass me because now I'm ignoring her, and she thinks I can't ignore him because he's the landlord. And I ended up ignoring him too because he's neurotic, and when she winds him up, he can just get going, and then he doesn't stop, and he just overthinks everything, and you know, that's his personality. So then in March, was it February, I'd been off chemo for about 2 months, but I think I hear my doctor say that I've lost 6 to 8 months worth of progress, and I believe that for the next 2 months, and it absolutely devastates me. But despite hearing that, my numbers still look good. I just believe that the tumor and the lesions got bigger than they actually had, and I misunderstand it, but I carry that misunderstanding around for 2 months, and I'm under the impression that I've lost 6 to 8 months worth of progress because I took 2 months off. That isn't the case. But that caused me to do more research. And when I was first diagnosed, I looked up, you know, what's the survivability rate of colon cancer? And it said 60%. And I was like, I got this. Like, I can be in that 60%. I'm positive. But I asked a more pointed question, and that was, what is the survival rate of colon cancer metastasized to the liver? And the answer I got was 13%, and I was crushed, and that compounded with the belief that I had that I'd lost 6 to 8 months worth of progress, and I was so crushed because I had worked so hard, and I felt like so many people cared about me and donated to my cause to help me, and I felt like I was letting all of them down, not just myself. But I was under that impression for a long time, and it hurt, as you can tell, just thinking about it again. I'm sorry. Oh God, this battle is so much harder than I thought it was gonna be. So I'm still looking for places to move at that time, but again, no one wants to rent to me because I don't have the full amount yet. And I'm trying to have conversations and talk to people about the progress that I'm making. Like, oh, this week I've got, $1,000 more towards the goal. Like, I'm ready to move. Like, I'm really interested in the space, and just nothing. More time goes by, the roommates escalate things at home. I try not to engage as much as possible, but it got bad, and I just wanted peace, and there wasn't any to be found at home. So things just got worse and worse there until I was finally able to get out. Whenever I had problems on Uber, I couldn't get through to them by phone anymore. I would get 5 minutes into a phone call to them, and I would get disconnected every time, and this would go on for months. So that's just one of the things I was dealing with. During March and April of 2025, chemo caused a lot of sores in my mouth that never seemed to fully heal and reoccur to the same severity every 2 weeks with treatment, with the chemo treatments. And then eating and drinking became a total and complete struggle, like just to talk, and I'm an Uber driver, so I'm talking to people all day, and I'm talking like this and trying not to move my mouth as much as possible, but it's my job to talk to people, so I have to do that, and every syllable is a challenge. They call this stuff magic mouthwash. I call it not magic mouthwash because it just doesn't work. I've gone clearly through almost 3 bottles of this. I still have the medication sitting here. Not that it's any good anymore, but it didn't work. It didn't help. By the end of March, I finally find a room in Dedham, Massachusetts through my ex-girlfriend. One of her friends has a room to rent to me, and I sign a lease for April 15th, and I start moving what I can in my car. I leave the big stuff until the financial help comes through, because I've got Wi-Fi at the new place now, and I'm able to, once I got my computer here, I was able to plug it in on the floor and like lay down in front of it and fill out the application for help to move. So I did that. I moved what I could, and I left my bed, I left my desk. I was sleeping on the floor for 2 months, and I just didn't have a bed, and it hurt like hell, and that compounded everything. And here I am just plugging away through it and keeping a positive attitude and dealing with all of that. But April 9th and the following couple of days, Facebook shut down my 3 Facebook accounts for unspecified reasons. I still to this day do not know why they did that. I appealed them. All of the appeals were denied. And this completely cut me off from any of my social circles there that I had taken 10 to 15 years to establish, depending on which account we're talking about. But all of them were over 10 years old. and I had different social circles on there, and had tapped into them from time to time to fundraise when I needed it. So there was that. I met up with my doctor again in mid-April, and he cleared up my earlier erroneous belief that I had lost 6 to 8 months worth of progress. And like, I'm hearing him talk, and he said the complete opposite of what I thought I heard 2 months earlier. And I stopped him and I said, Ryan, I'm on a first name basis with my doctors. I said, Ryan, wait a second, that's different than what you told me 2 months ago. And he goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry you left my office with that impression. And the relief lifted off of my shoulders in his office. I broke down crying right there in his office, because it was such a relief to realize I hadn't gone back that far in my fight, and believing that I had for 2 months was so hard. Sorry. So I asked him again what my odds are of fully beating colon cancer metastasized to my liver, and he says 15 to 20%, which is barely better than that 13%, so that doesn't do much for me. But then I asked him what separates people in that 15 to 20% from the rest of the 85 to 80%, and he says, lucky for you, you have all three things. He says, you're young, you're healthy, and the cancer isn't resisting the treatment. And I cried even more, because my hope had been restored. Like, hope that I can actually beat this had come back. Daily life at that time was sleeping on the floor, dealing with mouth sores, and working my ass off to try and just keep my head above water. The funds to fully move finally arrive in mid-May. I finally get the rest of my stuff. I'm able to set my desk here up. I'm able to get my bed. I'm able to sleep in my own bed for the first time in like 8 months. But and this is where I feel like things are starting to turn around for me. The rest of the Social Security money that was due to me came in around that time, and I had about $4,000 in my account, and I felt like, great, like, now I've got rent essentially paid for a few months in advance, and like, I can just breathe, I can take a breath. But the world, the universe had a different plan for me. At the beginning of June, one night at about 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, my car breaks down. And I can't get home, and I'm several miles from home, thankfully not too far, but it turns out it's the battery and an alternator, and I have to get the car towed somewhere in the middle of the night, and I don't know where to bring it, because it's the middle of the night. I can't talk to anybody or get a hold of anybody anywhere, so I ended up just bringing it to a dealership that I knew was close by looking at the map and figuring it out. And Basically, it was a $1,700 battery and alternator repair. Why is it so expensive? Because things are so expensive now, but it's also the labor involved in trying to get to those places in the car, because the engine is so compact that you've got to take so many things apart just to get to it. So the labor ends up being a lot more. Then the shop calls and says that the car's done. I go pick it up. I drive it off the lot. I'm not even like 2 minutes off the lot, and like it doesn't shift, and it's not, I can't drive it. So I bring it back. They look at it over the next few days, and then they say it's going to be a $9,000 transmission repair. And I'm like, no way in hell am I paying $9,000 for a transmission repair. I take it somewhere else to get a quote. I get a quote for about $6,000, a little under. And I say, repair it. Why? Why would I repair a $6,000 transmission in a car that's about 4 or 5 years old? I'll tell you why. Because I owe $14,000 on it, and the bank had already, this happened in 2024 after my diagnosis. This was one of the miracles that I received. The bank had removed all of the interest. They brought my interest rate down. I was in a really bad loan and I knew it, but I didn't really have a choice. When I had to get a new car, I didn't really have a choice. But the bank dropped the interest rate from like 22% to 0, and that dropped off like $23,000 worth of interest that I wouldn't have to pay. They lowered the price of the principal by $4,000, and they cut my monthly payments in half. I did not want to get out of a loan like that with those kind of terms. I was lucky to have it, and I knew it. And again, I still owed $14,000 on the car. So my only real choice was to pay for the $6,000 repair. I didn't want to carry $14,000 over onto a new loan with whatever new interest rate I was going to have. That didn't make any sense at all. So that's why I ended up going with the option to repair. A lot of people are like, oh, I just get out of the car, and it's not that simple. I'm already in a great loan, and you know, I don't want to get out of that. I don't want to get out of those terms. I'm not going to get that again. I won't get that second chance again. So then I've got to go through the car rental process, and you can do that in the Uber app. They have a deal set up with Avis. So I make an appointment with Avis like 5 minutes up the road. They give me a $40 credit. Uber gives me a $40 credit to get a ride to the rental location. So I Uber there. Thankfully, like, I don't use the whole amount, obviously, if they're just 5 minutes up the road. But they didn't have the car that I rented in the app. So then I have no choice but to go to another location, which is like 30 miles away. So I go there, and only to find out that they only take credit cards, and I've got 3 of them, but my limits are all $4 short, and they won't take cash, they won't take bank cards, and I call all 3 credit card companies just, hey, can I get a $5 limit increase? And all of them were like, no. So, okay, so that's not going to work. So now I'm 30 miles from home. I've got no ride back. Literally the night before, I had paid my phone bill. And as I'm calling around my friends for help or even advice or like whatever I can figure out, like just to talk it through, like, here's what I'm in, what do I do? They shut my phone off. And I called 611 to like explain my situation, and they just absolutely refused to turn it back on. So now I'm feeling so frustrated, and I don't see a way forward, and I just go outside, I sit down and cry, and I'm just kind of letting it out, dealing with the frustration. And I've got 3 strangers that come up to me to offer me help, but there's really nothing that they can do. And you know, one of them gives me $40 And I'm like, sir, I really, I've got money. I don't need your $40, and I appreciate it, but I don't need it. And he insists that I take it, and he's like, look, here's how you can take the bus home. And I'm like, great, like now I'm gonna take the bus home. I don't know where I am. I don't know which buses to take. Like I gotta figure all that out. Like on top of everything else that I'm dealing with, I've got to figure out buses. There was a nearby hotel. I went in, I got Wi-Fi, I used it to contact Uber. They issued another $40 credit to get me home, and then I finally get out of there. Eventually I figure out that my phone was shut off because even though I had paid the bill the night before, I had forgot to make a new payment arrangement, and the bill was due that day. So instead of pushing it out more time to be able to pay it, now I've got to come up with the money to pay it. So I kind of have to like beg for the money and borrow it from a friend in order to get it turned back on. And I do that just so I can keep being able to try to work. So Uber has accounts with both Avis and Hertz. So then I start looking into Hertz as an option. I make a reservation at a Hertz location, which is about an hour away. It was the closest one. Thankfully, they take bank cards, and where I actually have the money to rent the car, but it takes all day to get into a car. And I was supposed to rent the car 2 days earlier at the Avis location, and now the next day I have chemo. So the day that I rent the car is the day before chemo, and I'm typically resting that day. So now I can't really work the day before chemo. I have to gather my strength because, chemo still at that point was like zapping me. I was still losing energy. So that first week that I have the rental car, I end up like my energy is zapped for like 5 days. So the day before I can't work because I'm gathering my strength. The day of I can't work. The day after I can't work. And then a total of 5 days I can't work. So then there's the 6th day, which was the first day I had the car. Then the 7th day I can work. But I don't meet the quota that's required to keep the rental for that week. So then I can't renew the car for another week because now I've been placed on, because I didn't meet the requirements of like 30 rides. Now I've been placed on the do not rent list with the state. And now I'm ineligible to rent the car again. So I have to go to the office, which is an hour away. I have to tell them, like they want me to return the car because I haven't been able to meet the requirements. And I tell them, look, I've got chemo. I show them the port in my chest, and I'm like, this is what I've dealt with for the last week. What can you do to help me? And he goes, well, if you can get me some document to prove that that's the case, I can show it to the agency with the state that's in charge of doing this, and since you have a valid medical excuse, we'll be able to take you off of that list, and we'll be able to get it cleared up, and you'll be all good to go, and you can have the car for another week. So I do that, and the second week goes a lot better than the first week. I'm able to meet the requirements, but I'm not getting ahead financially, and I can see that already. And I say, you know what, I'm going to try one more time. So the third week I'm on chemo again, and things end up the same way as the first time, except I met the quota and I don't get put on the list, and I don't get that problem again. But now it's a new problem. The fourth week renting the car is the same as the second week. I still lose money, and I realize I'm not going to be able to do chemo and raise the money for the car repair. So I made the very, very hard decision to go off of chemo, and I didn't know how long that was going to take, but I knew that that's the only choice that I had. I had no access to Facebook. I had no way to ask for help, and I did ask for help, and I just didn't get any. Like as sad as it is to say, like, your friends get tapped out after a while, you know? Like, they just, it's just the nature of it. They just kind of look at you like a lost cause, you know? Like, you just constantly need help. And you do. You need the support. You need the help. But that's how it is. So I didn't have a choice. I had to do that. I had to get off chemo, and I had to work my ass off. So as soon as I was off chemo, I set out to work, and I worked for like 2.5 months straight. And I got off chemo the end of June. My last blood test was July 3rd, and it showed my CEA, which is the tumor marker in your blood that shows how much cancer is in your blood. And that was at 152 at that time. Cancer-free is considered like 0 to 4. So not amazing, but still like not so bad. I was still dealing with the mouth sores at the time. And that was another reason I wanted to go off chemo, because I was tired of dealing with the mouth sores. They were there for like 3 months straight, and they wouldn't go away. Sometime during the summer, my aunt bought me a new blender so I could get back on my diet and the green smoothies, but that was so much easier said than done because I was working so much, and like I had no time to shop. I had no time to sit at home and make a smoothie. So that didn't happen as quickly as I had hoped. It turns out the rental car has bucket seats, and here's another huge problem. Bucket seats cause your back to go out if you're not acclimated to sitting in them. And like, I'm a little bit on the heavier side, but even my aunt, who's on the lighter side, has trouble with bucket seats, and her back went out too because of bucket seats. So here I am in mid-July, like throwing my back muscles out because I'm in the car so much and like sitting in the bucket seats. About 3 weeks after my back muscles went out, which I'm dealing with every day, the pain of that, it turned into sciatica. And if you know what sciatica is, it's very, very extremely painful when you move. It literally feels like you're being stabbed multiple times in multiple places at the same time. And it's excruciating, and you have to move. You can't stop. Like, it's excruciating just getting in and out of bed, just rolling over, just moving into a more comfortable position. You tense that muscle, and it just it locks up, and it's so painful. The only thing I could really do is go for a massage, and I reached out to a friend who is a figure skater, and she coaches other figure skaters, and I said, hey, like, do you know how to deal with this? Like, I'm sure as a coach or trainer you've dealt with this. And she tells me about this guy that I can go to, and he was like a miracle for her. She's like, anytime I have sciatica, I go to him. So I'm like, all right, let me go to him. He was amazing. I had been dealing with that pain for weeks. I didn't even realize how much stress it put on my body because I was trying to ignore it and just go through my day. And when I left his massage parlor at the end of that, I felt like I was walking on cloud 9. Like, the relief that I had felt was amazing. And so I ended up going to him a total of 3 times for him to work it out. And each time I had a 2-hour session. And it cost me around $500 to deal with that. But I needed it. I absolutely needed it. That was part of the reason that I used credit cards to get out of the car sooner, because I couldn't deal with that anymore. It was costing me time and money, and I had to get out of the rental car. I had to get my own car back. And it slowed me down, but I couldn't let it stop me. I had no choice. I had to get out of it. Also, during that time of dealing with the back muscles being out and sciatica, I had a toothache for about 2 weeks during that time. And thankfully it went away, but did it really? We'll get back to that. Finally, in early September, I was able to pay for the car repair and get out of the rental, which ended up costing me $4,300 for the rental and $450 in tolls, because apparently my E-ZPass responder wasn't being charged, and I ended up paying more than what I normally should have paid, because Hertz has a convenience charge, and they charge you a crap ton of money for that. So that's how that went. So by then I can get back to work. I have to keep working hard. The sciatica goes away fully once I'm back in my own car and I don't have bucket seats anymore. Now it's time to make up for all of the bills that I let slide and start to catch up. And at this time I start falling behind on rent, and like the time that I had, I had a few months worth of rent that were kind of paid ahead of time due to the help that I was able to get. But that run out, and I paid my rent for September, but October, like I couldn't do it. I was trying to catch up all the other things and keep them current. And then early to mid October, I start feeling severe mental and physical fatigue, and I dealt with that for about 3 months. I'm sort of kind of pulling out of it now. But it prevented me from working hard and catching up, and even returning to chemo when I wanted to. So on Halloween, I went to the emergency room, and it didn't really shed any kind of clue as to what the problem was. So they prescribed to me an antibiotic called Augmentin, which clears up the mental fatigue in about 2 weeks. And that was probably an infection from the toothache that I had in August. It probably, the infection probably went up into my brain, and that was causing mental fatigue. I had found the symptoms trying to diagnose myself and figure out what it was after I couldn't get any answers. But I had to return to the ER 5 days later for severe pain in my lower right gut where the tumor is. And it didn't show anything on the X-ray, CAT scan, or MRI. So, thankfully it wasn't the tumor swelling up or inflammation there. Thankfully it wasn't that. Turned out it was just constipation. My colon had stopped moving food through me, and I was getting backed up, and that's what the pain was. So, some prune juice and some laxatives and stuff later, that starts to move again, and I'm able to figure that out. But I just, on a hunch, I say to the doctors while I'm there, can you test my CEA and see where it is? And again, CEA is the tumor marker. Normal, cancer-free, is 0 to 4, and my test comes back at 3,600, and higher than 3,600. So I'm freaking out. I'm that's the cause of the physical fatigue. The cancer is so high in my body that it's zapping my energy. So my doctor gets wind of that because I'm at a different hospital, but that hospital updates my chart. So my doctor gets that information and calls me and says, you got to come in. I'm seeing your CEA and you've got to come in. We got to talk about moving forward. So I go in, they test me, and then they set up an appointment for chemo just before Thanksgiving. So I started chemo just before Thanksgiving. This is my second chemo treatment, being back on it now. I got on it 2 days ago. I'm due to leave here in 20 minutes to go get it detached. I can detach it myself, but I'm at a new hospital. I moved from Worcester to Needham, so now I'm a lot closer to home. Instead of an hour drive to there and then an hour drive back from there, I'm now 12 minutes from where I'm being treated. So they need to make sure that I know how to detach myself, and so I've just got to go to them to prove to them that I can do that, and I've got to leave in 20 minutes. So they test me when I do my first chemo out in Worcester. My CEA was just under 4,000. It was 3990, and I go on my first treatment. I go off my first treatment. About 2 days before I'm due to start this treatment, I feel like I have enough energy to go out and try to work. So I work for a few hours. I work the next day. And then, so I'm able to get like 1.5 days work in it for the first time in like 3 months. And then I go on chemo, and chemo zaps my energy. And so now it's going to be at least a few days coming off of chemo before I can work again. And I'm behind still, so there's that. I end up spending Thanksgiving alone. I'm just zapped. I go out for dinner. It's terrible, unfortunately. Like, I can't even have a good meal. I'm on my second round now. I'm not feeling very energetic. I'm 3 months behind on rent. I'm 3 months behind on car payments. I'm 3 months behind on my credit cards. I'm 1 month behind on my phone bill that's due today. I've got to make I've got to delay the payment. I've got to make a payment arrangement. And I'm about to be 1 month behind. I actually am 1 month behind on car insurance. So that's 2025 for Matt. It's hard as it is for me to ask for help. I desperately need your help. And if you've watched this video in its entirety, or even parts of it, and you've just skipped to it through the end, thank you so much for listening to me and what I've dealt with. And I'm sorry this is so long. I will put a disclaimer at the beginning to set the speed to twice as fast so you can get through it. But thank you for your time, and thank you for your concern, and for your prayers, for anything, for any support at all that you're able to provide to me. Thank you so much. Thank you.